just to kind of. Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sustainable in the City, April 13th. We're in the throes of spring, talking about community gardens today. We're going to let everyone roll on in. Very excited.
Got our situation up here. There we are. Is that it? Are we seeing?
Oh, we see it.
Oh, we're seeing our topic for today, our guests for today. Super exciting to have folks joining us. We'll give everybody just another minute. All right.
Settled.
All right. So
You ready?
why don't
Awesome.
let's get started. Let's get moving through.
We got such an exciting episode. We're chomping at the bit to get it to y'all. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We are here at Sustainable in the City once again. Thank you all for joining us. Today's episode is getting outside and into community. Love it. So I want to welcome our lovely guests that we have today. We have Hemalatha Gokhale and we have Missy Hamilton, and they are talking about their 2 community gardens that we are very excited to hear more about. I want to remind you all that Sustainable in the City is a partnership between my organization, Urban Green Lab, and Jen Harmon's organization, Zero Waste Nashville, where we bring you all things sustainability and Nashville to talk through and get everyone excited about the work that they're doing in the community. So we really appreciate y'all coming in today. Jen, how you feeling? What's up?
Feeling good. I'm really excited about this topic. We've got some wonderful speakers today. Before we get to those speakers, though, I do want to remind everybody about how the show is going to run and how to use the chat features. We always use the chat during our presentation, so y'all are silenced just verbally, but you are not silenced via the chat. So that is where you can put in your thoughts, your comments, and especially your questions. So make sure when you're in the chat that you select it. There's a little section where it says to. Make sure you select everyone so that whenever you're asking a question or making a comment, that goes to more than just us that are here on the screen today, but goes to everybody that is participating with us. So include all of that information there. Select everyone. We're also, of course, every episode is recorded as well. So we are recording today. So if you have to jump off early, or if you want to share this with friends, family, frenemies, anyone at all that you want to share this with, we are going to have this on YouTube later on. So don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. So we'll be putting a link to that in the chat as well. We're also going to put a quick question in the chat to help you remember how to use that chat function. Make sure you're all getting groovy with that. So our question for today, I want you to all put this into the chat. Do you know your closest community garden? Or is there a community garden that you are involved with? So if any of you know about your nearest garden or work or volunteer with community garden, throw that in the chat, let us know. It's okay, you can also quickly look it up if you want to quickly look it up. Excellent, we've got someone involved with one in Shreveport, Tracy City. Excellent. So keep putting those in there. We're also going to put in our chat our next episode that's coming up. So we actually have our next episode already scheduled and ready to go. So make sure you register for that, Communicating for Sustainable Change. So that's going to be available to you next month, of course, the second Wednesday of every month at noon. So, all right. Ooh, let's see. Ed, working with the community, install one as part of a development. That is excellent. Wonderful.
Love it.
All right. I feel like people are feeling it. We got people using the chat. So remember to ask all your questions there. I'll be gathering those and we'll be asking them to our panelists at the end of today's presentation. So don't hesitate to get in there and use that chat. And Christina, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you all. And we have two experts here about community gardens and their specific community gardens. And we are going to start off with Farm in the City's Hemalatha Gokhale. And so Lata, if you are ready, we would love to hear a little bit about you and the work that you're doing over at Farm in the City and how it relates to sustainability in Nashville. So if you are ready, why don't you go ahead and share that screen?
Oh, Christina, I was just going to start with an introduction. First of all, thanks for having me here.
Please do.
I am really excited to be here with Missy from Bell Garden. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Bellevue and went to Bellevue High School. The high school used to be what is now Bellevue Middle School, which is right next to Bell Garden. And when Bellevue High School closed in the 1980s, I moved on to University School of Nashville, or USN. And at that time, there were about 40 of us in the class of 1987. And one of those members of that class happens to actually be Dan Heller, the founder of Urban Green Lab. And except for my postgraduate years and training, I've pretty much lived right here in Nashville for the past 50 years. And since 2011, I've been part of an MDHA community garden farm in the city as a volunteer. And like all community gardens, we grow food, we grow soil, and we grow community. And I'd like to now take you on this slideshow tour of the garden. I'm going to take a second here to share my screen. Actually, let me just take another second here. Okay.
Looks good, Lata. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we've been, Farm in the City has been here since 2010. Let me just, sorry, I'm getting my presenter mode out here. Sorry, let me just try this again here.
No worries. Take your time. I think everyone on the audience has had their fair share of screen sharing issues over these past 2 or so years. So everyone has.
Let me try this.
Understands. Again. I can see my captions at the bottom.
I can hear my neighbor rocking out in the front yard.
Sorry, it's capturing all of that. Let me try it one more time, and then if I can't get it, I'll figure something else out here.
I think if those captions stay up there, that's A-okay.
Yeah, let me just do that with my, well, no, it's capturing my, okay, let's try this one more time. It's not working. Okay, we'll just stick with what we have here. Sorry about this.
Beautiful.
So I wanted to just go ahead and just, let's see if I can. So Farm in the City is lucky to have many community members join it as an organization. We have Starbucks, we have Oasis Center, we have the Environmental Science Group from MLK, which also supports us. It's a variety of members throughout the community. It really takes a community to run a community garden. And some people have asked me, what's a physician doing helping run a community garden? And I like to remind people that Hippocrates, who famously said, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food, was actually the father of medicine. So I think it's a perfect fit for a physician to be helping run a community garden. This is just some examples of some food that we have grown at the community garden over the years. And I'm just gonna just go through these slides really quickly. So one of the things that I think I've learned over the past 11 years helping run this community garden is that we can do a lot of small, simple actions that lead to helping run a community garden. And so what are some of these small ideas that we can take advantage of? Number one, take advantage of small spaces. We've been talking about community gardens, but there are limitless underutilized spaces in cities where food can be grown. Think small, think rooftops, balconies, parking lots and walls, think public and private spaces. Even a crack in the sidewalk can get me going. And most plants that we grow for food only require about 6 inches of space, and even an inch of space can be enough to encourage a seed on its way. So no sunlight, no problem. Think of all those wonderful members of the fungi kingdom. Number two, there are numerous different foods we can try. We only eat a small percentage of the food items that are available, and we don't even have to talk about eating insects today. The Plants for a Future database lists more than 20,000 edible plants, but with current eating trends, 90% of our diet is just 20 of these plants. So every gardener at some point makes the realization that many of the weeds that grow in disturbed soils can be nutritious and tasty depending on how they are prepared. So imagine if each one of us were to switch out something that we ordinarily see as a weed. Right now, there are nettles, members of the mint family, and chickweed sprouting up everywhere. And if it's an invasive plant, there's even a word, invasive word, to describe someone who utilizes the invasives. And right here, I'm kind of doing this as a show and tell part of the slideshow. Since I had such luck sharing my screen, I think I'm going to stick to show and tell. But this is chickweed here. Chickweed is something that a lot of the gardeners are going to be familiar with. And then planting here. These are two really easy to identify plants, especially once you've learned their distinguishing features. And both of these can be eaten raw or cooked. So learning about and utilizing one weed would be a small action, keeping it small and keeping it simple. Number three, what about growing tropical plants in indoor spaces year-round for food harvest? These are just some examples that I have. This is chaya, and then I have longevity spinach here, and curry leaf plant. These actually all vacation in my garage each winter. And like with any plant that you maybe new to you or that you're trying for the first time, you want to do your own research. The chaya is something that needs to be cooked before you eat. So number four, when we grow things, we start becoming familiar with all the parts of the plants that we don't see in the grocery store. Examples are the tops of carrots. This is some carrot tops that I have, but really any of the root vegetables have tops that can be utilized, especially think of the brassica family. So other things that we grow in the community garden, we love growing okra. These are some dried pods that we got from the garden last year, and they have really tall stems. These are plants that can grow up to 10 feet in the garden. The thing with okra, all the leaves are edible, something that we don't normally think about. The stalks have fiber. The okra seeds, which you can kind of hear if I shake the pods. The okra seeds can be ground up into a flour. They can be pressed for oil. There's just so many uses for this one plant. And one of my favorite questions that I get at the community garden, and this is actually the most common question I get, is people will point to the okra in the garden and they'll say, "What tree is that?" And I get that more than any other question. And I love it actually, because I get to tell them, hey, that's okra. In the same family, the Malvasia family, I have roselle here, which is a variety of hibiscus. The outer calyces, which are dry now, can be used dry or fresh. And what you can do is you can use these to make a hibiscus tea. You can make jam with it. And like the okra, the leaves are edible and the stalks have a good amount of fiber in them. So just other uses for plants that we see at the garden. One more example, I've grown peas for years. And these, lately I've discovered that I love just the pea shoots alone, even before you get the peas. These pea shoots are a great substitute for lettuce and salads in every way. And how many of you have access to a fig tree? Besides the figs, it turns out when you roast these beautiful leaves, you get this wonderful aroma. And that has been a wonderful use. One of the ways we use it is to make iced tea or even ice cream. So if you've never had a fig leaf ice cream, maybe this is the year to try something like that. But when you grow all these things, it's just, you just keep learning more and more about it. And I keep telling people in urban centers, just because you live in an urban center doesn't mean you don't have access to nature or with your other urban dwellers. One other item I have is broomcorn here. Sometimes we're worried about the soil quality. And I think when you start growing things that aren't necessarily edible in urban soils, like broomcorn, you can start growing things that you can use for other purposes. And we actually have made brooms at one of our volunteer sessions at the garden. And besides broomcorn, think things like native grasses that you can use for weaving, other things like fast growing trees that maybe you can harvest for wood. I just envision a whole network of small scale farms that can be tended by urban residents. And last but not least, in terms of my theme of simple ideas, I have here just a bowl's worth of compostable material. So what I do in my gardens is if you have your garden beds covered by leaf mulch, you've already got the brown matter in there. So when you put the green matter in a ratio of 1 to 2, you're pretty much creating these small little mounds throughout your garden beds, and these can just be rotated out. And you end up having this composting area, which doesn't take up a lot of space. And it's something that can be done very easily. And I like to remind people that you don't have to compost every single thing that comes out of your house, but if you could dedicate maybe 1 day a week to saying, hey, I've got a small amount that I can put in my garden, I think it's just an easy way to do it. And with that, I really want to thank you for allowing me to share today. And I think that's kind of funny. I had that written in my notes, but I obviously had a little trouble sharing my screen, but I'll work on that. And look forward to seeing you all at the garden.
Wonderful, Latha. Thank you so much. Wonderful, wonderful. I know you had some issues with the presentation, but we got to see the pictures. They looked great, full of color, full of life, full of smiling faces. And you can just tell when you're talking about it that you're so passionate about this work and this kind of new chapter in your life that has fit so kind of neatly into your trajectory that you've had. And so that's really wonderful. We really appreciate it. If anybody has any questions specifically for Farm in the City or Latha, please feel free to put those in the chat. We will all be staying on the call until the end and we'll be able to get to those. But we're gonna turn it over now to Missy Hamilton from the Bellevue Edible Learning Lab. And we will hear about what she is doing over at that one. Very excited. And Missy, you can take on over right now.
Hey, wonderful. And thank you so much, Latha. That was beautiful, especially I love the logic of things that are not necessarily edible, but are still important to building community, like having your volunteers make the corn brooms. I mean, that's just absolutely fascinating. And I do want to tell everyone that for some reason I'm sharing my community with a bee, which is amazing, but I have a little visitor in here. So let's just hope that that works out well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am going to share my presentation. And is it sharing?
It is not.
It is not.
Oh, it's coming up now.
No. All right, Latha, we're going to get this done. Okay, so we've been out of the corporate world for a minute, so some of us have forgotten what PowerPoint is. So everyone, thank you so much I am Missy Hamilton. I am from Bellevue's best kept secret, the Bell Garden, also known as the Bellevue Edible Learning Lab. And we're going to talk a little bit about our history and our mission. When it says on my first screen that I'm the president of the board and garden manager, we've actually grown so much over the past few years that we have several garden managers. So as we go through the presentation, hopefully I'll be able to introduce you to some of our amazing staff. So the first thing that I get asked is, well, what is the Bell Garden? Like, what do you do? That's also secondary to, we used to always get, well, I don't know what you are. Where are you? We'll get to that in just a moment. So the Bell Garden, we're a hybrid community and school garden. We are on the Bellevue campus of Bellevue Middle School. We're across from Red Caboose Park. I tell everybody we're next to the track and next to the library. We're over an acre. You'll hear me first before you can see us. So in addition to being a community and school garden, we're also our own 501c3 nonprofit. And it's interesting, we are run entirely by volunteer labor. So none of us get paid. And we're managed by a board of directors. And like I said, we have 3 garden managers. Our garden is split into the greenhouse and field rows, which we'll get to in a moment. And then we have over 20 raised beds. So I and Ariana Nimitz were responsible for the raised beds. And then we have a large herb garden. Then we also have a group of our bloom patrol that manages all of the wonderful flowers and fruits that we have on campus. So that's what we are, but what are we doing? So the short part of our mission is that we exist to cultivate, guide, and encourage shared community values of healthy living and lifelong learning. Well, that sounds lovely. And what I'm going to talk about today is how we actually operationalize our mission. So we're here to promote the physical activity, the healthy eating, environmental stewardship, and multicultural connections. And that's wonderful in print. But again, what we want to talk about today is operationalizing our mission for the community, or mission in action. So when I say that we are going to provide and practice and do all these wonderful things, well, let's talk today about how we actually do that. So throughout this presentation, we're going to talk about how important it is to the Bell that we practice effective program management. So when I say that, we don't just come in and throw things out there. For our sustainability, and because we are a 501(c)(3), and I say sustainability not only for the organization, but also in teaching sustainability for Nashville, everything that we do has to have a program and a 1 to 3 to 5 year plan attached to it. So on the front end, we start out by being very organized, very mindful, and it's imperative that everything we do supports our mission, the schools that we support in our community. The second part of it is that we make sure that we offer appropriate volunteer opportunities. So when I talk about that, and of course, we're going to see slides of our beautiful volunteers, what I mean is that we offer volunteer opportunities and hours that are accessible to everyone. So it's not conducive to a lot of our working fellows if we only have volunteer hours at 11 o'clock on a Friday. It's not helpful if we have limiting physical activities. So again, we make sure that our volunteers are appropriate to our community and the folks that want to come and hang out with us. We educate accordingly. So when we say we're going to educate the community, we mean it. We're going to talk in a little bit about all of our classes. We have wonderful volunteers and wonderful teachers that come in not only to educate our students in the Bellevue Middle School and other homeschooling opportunities, but also teaching teaching our community how they can garden. Sometimes it's overwhelming, so we try to break that down a little bit. It's also imperative to us in our mission that we reduce garden waste. Not a day goes by, and if some of you could see the back of my background, we're always asking people to bring us your used cottage cheese containers so we can start plants in them. There'll always be something in the social media about we need milk jugs, and we'll talk about our greenhouse and why we love milk jugs in just a little bit. And also it is how we compost and how we use our watering systems. Again, the most important thing is that we provide access to all. So regardless of abilities, we want you to come to the garden, and we'll get to that in just a moment. And then I think one of the most important things for me, I said when we talk about how we have effective program management, we tick and tie our planting and our harvest to what our community and the food banks that we support actually need. So let's talk about what do we offer. So you can see on your screen, when I say ADA compliant, I want to start there. We say ADA light because ADA compliance and on metro property is different. And because we cannot be fully ADA compliant, we say light. So we make sure that all of our pathways along our beds are accessible to wheelchairs. And we test them regularly with some of our wonderful volunteers to make sure that everyone can get in. And the same goes with our ability gardens. For some of our populations that may be hypo or hypersensitive, we have appropriate plants, appropriate rest areas. We have raised beds for wheelchairs and beds for folks with arthritis or other issues. We definitely love our Hillwood students. We are part of their exceptional education program. So the kiddos come out 2 to 3 times a week and come and work with us instead of other options. Of course, we have our portable classroom and kitchen. We're going to talk about our classes in a minute. We have a new greenhouse apprenticeship for this year, which has really helped kick what we're able to grow into overdrive, because now we have over 6,000 square feet of field rows that we use not only for our farm stand, but to donate to the community, the Bellevue Community Food Bank and other food banks in need. We're finishing up 20 new raised beds, thanks to the Predators Foundation for that grant. We had to replace all our school garden and ability garden beds, and that has been a wonderful experience. We have daylily gardens, cut flowers. We focus specifically, or try to at least, on native plants. We've redone our Victory Garden in an effort to teach all of our wonderful history and social studies classes to the young folks. We have a myriad veggies, herbs, and fruits. We partner with Arts Bellevue, another wonderful nonprofit group, to do a sunflower maze. This will be year 2 of that. We do have our farm stand. We offer plant and seed sales. We have event spaces, and woo, do we have classes. So to get us to where we need to be with offering the classes and managing everything, I want to talk about our wonderful volunteers. So formerly, we depended upon Hands-On Nashville, and we had 1 Saturday a week. And the Hands-On Nashville is absolutely great, but the issue with that, when you're planning out your programs and what needs to get done, weather can impact it. Sometimes it can be overwhelming for volunteers who are like, hey, I just wanted to weed. So what we offer is we have our own volunteers, and I'll get to that in just a moment. So we're always working with volunteers every Saturday for sure, 9 to 12. We now do this year round. People think, oh, what do you do in January? I'm like, yeah, come and find out. We always have set hours on Tuesdays because we harvest for the Bellevue Food Bank. I want to show you some outstanding pictures of our muscle days. That's when the fun starts, where we really, really, really need that muscle to get everything up and going. And then also, as I mentioned, we have several programs where I need to work with specific volunteers. So folks that are interested in exceptional education, they come out with me to work with the students from Bellevue and Hillwood. And what's really important to all of this is we started orienting, I will say, and having our own key volunteers. So that what that means is that we always have groups. A lot of them did come from Hands-On Nashville, but then they say, hey, I really enjoyed this experience. I want to come back. What do I do? So we offer orientation, and then they will become key volunteers. So I have some pictures I hope you can see now of some of our wonderful volunteers. I especially want to give a shout out to Parker. Parker is one of our wonderful teens. We actually kind of have a teen ambassador program. She is an Ensworth student, and as you can see her in the middle, she is excited because all of our volunteers get free produce to take home. This is an example of what we do during the winter in a muscle day. So you can see, and they actually look pretty happy. We had to do some major renovations this year. We were having a terrible time with flooding because of our pathways and plastic that was underneath the pathways. So you can see this lovely gentleman on the left is helping to move all the flagstones and reorient them so we can put them all back or move them off the property because of the drainage issue. You can see in the middle, that is our old Victory Garden, which has been redone. And look at this happy gentleman on the right. He is weeding and digging. We love our teens. You can see they look happy, right? Especially Jen on the far right. She and her brother and mom, Sarah and her mom Jen and her lovely brother Wyatt always come and have the best time with that beautiful smile on her face. So again, with these wonderful volunteers, that is how we are able to offer our wonderful classes. So they are called Growing Together classes. We used to be able to only do them, we call them second Saturdays, but now because we've had so much help and we have a wonderful, wonderful board of directors, each director has a skill set that they bring to the garden to help us build in our community. So we do everything from garden planning, we do seed starting, especially we're really focused on helping people who have never gardened before or who are dealing with some specific issues like bugs or plant viruses. We love to teach container gardening and how people can have exceptional harvests in small spaces. I love the idea of garden to table for the overwhelmed, right? Like, I don't know what to do. I was on Pinterest for an hour and a half. And then we have Zero Waste for Kids and my personal favorite, Missy's Unfortunate Garden Math for All. That's right, folks. If you're like me and you were sitting there bored at Bellevue Middle School back in the day and you're like, what am I going to do with this geometry? Well, I found out. So in addition to this, we also have some wonderful opportunities where we do yoga in the garden. Thank you, Kristen, wherever you are. And also teaching meditation and how to work with medicinal herbs. And let's not forget our homeschool science and nutrition and general botany. Botany doesn't really have a space that I've seen so far in MNPS, so we're looking to bring that back. What you are seeing now, hopefully, this is exciting. So the Bellevue, the Bell Garden is home to what used to be, unfortunately, kind of a storage unit. So in the middle, we have our lovely, I call him Farmer Stewart. He is one of the other garden managers, as I mentioned earlier. Farmer Stewart manages the field rows as well as the greenhouse. So if you look closely, what do you see in that greenhouse? You see plants. So here's how we use what we have on campus to start our harvest, to start our planting and engage the community. So I'm going to start with engaging the community. We had a lot of folks say, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I want a bed. How do I get a bed? Well, with community gardens nationwide, I will say sometimes you have issues of bug infestations, of disease, and abandonment. So people get really, really, really super excited on the front end, and we love that. But if you're just starting, unfortunately, one cucumber beetle can bring mosaic virus to the entire garden. So we came up with a solution. Stewart not only uses his students or apprentices to grow all the plants that we use for our plant sales, to donate to the community food bank, or for our own farm stand, but he uses it to educate people on how to diagnose disease, how to properly work with pests, such that once you go through his apprenticeship program, you actually come to me and you can have your very own garden bed. Again, the rules are not, I'm not terribly awful, but what this again does is it helps folks in the community who have never gardened before learn the secrets. And I mean, if you can see the picture, you can see all of the milk jugs and the cottage cheese containers. Again, over 2,000 plants that we've already started. So, oh, look, everybody, more cottage cheese. So people, we know in Nashville with recycling, it's onesies or twosies, right? I'm in Bellevue, we don't get Metro recycling, but we know onesies or twosies. So what do you do with the rest, your 5Es? What do you do with your takeout? Bring it to us. We have Deborah Stillwell. She is the vice president of the board, and she has done a phenomenal job, not only in managing social outreach, but anytime we need something, it comes. So it is imperative for us to encourage sustainability in the garden. Again, sustainability as an organization, and then sustainability over time, teaching sustainability. Instead of being fearful of what is to come in the environment, we try to teach our volunteers and our students, these are things that we can do to help. So we are in the process of converting to no mow, which is very exciting, except for our little patches for the bees. We do love our pollinators. We focus on appropriate water and fertilization. If any of you have ever used Music City's Gold, you'll know what I'm talking about. We manage our water as effectively as possible. We're actually in the process of putting in a new drip irrigation system. We love native perennial. Native perennial and native plants. You probably get the point. So anything native to Tennessee, especially when Latha was talking about edibles such as chickweed, we love to incorporate that into what we're doing and eating. Companion planting is absolutely imperative for us. There is a book called Vegetables Love Flowers, and part of organic gardening is knowing what to plant together, what not to plant together, and what is going to bring our little friends. We also participate in seed saving and exchanging, not only with the library system, but also with gardeners all over town. Last summer, Deborah and I actually, was it last summer? Wow, the years, drove out to East Nashville, where this lovely woman was moving, and she gave us all of her amazing medicinal herbs from her front yard, and we're out there digging them all up and planting them. And how much money did that save us? And it saved her heart, because she knew that all of her care was going for more care and love. So again, I spoke earlier about how we had to remove all the plastic that was underneath the beds that had been there for years, and working on improving the drainage, but improving it in a way that does not harm our own Metro water system or our neighbors, because just because it's organic doesn't mean it's good for the water. We always encourage, and again, I hope you can't see my house right now. We reuse, reuse, reuse. As you can see, the cottage cheese containers, we poke drainage holes in them, and look, you got a new way to plant sunflowers as we've got here. And knowing our bug friends. Now, this happens to be my absolute favorite. So it's important to know what we need to plant into the garden to bring the good bugs. And we know what we need to do to plant the not so helpful bugs. And then as always, compost, compost, compost. There's compost everywhere. So we have a huge, bless Stuart's heart, we have a huge composting area behind the greenhouse. And we also work with local companies and the school to encourage zero waste and composting. Also, I had to share a little bit of our community outreach. I was talking about Deborah Stillwell earlier, and what she brought in social media to the garden, getting the word out. But this is, we think we're funny. This is one of our wonderful volunteers, Gail. And this is a standard post for us saying, Gail loves our Bell Garden blackberry and tomato jam made from our own blackberries and tomatoes. Gail returns her empty jars to us so we can use them again to make our delicious jams. Be like Gail, return your jars. So this actually touches on two pieces of the garden that are so important. Number one is food waste. We understand we operate our own food stand, farm stand, and sometimes people will be like, oh, I don't know if that's fresh. It may not be perfectly fresh, but I guarantee you can turn it into a cocktail or some type of jam. So that is also part of our education and our outreach, and what we do as volunteers internally is learning how to really use everything in the garden so that nothing goes to waste. You can also, again, see one of our phenomenal posts saying, we need 500 of your milk jugs, please. Just drop them off. We'll clean them out. It's our problem, not yours. So earlier I touched on the importance of access, providing access to the garden for all. So what does that mean? Well, we really pivoted in 2020 because the school was shut down. So what are you going to do? Well, we stopped everything and we focused on growing and harvesting food for the Bellevue Community Bank and for all others in the area. Now, when I say this, we would make friends. If you can see this picture, you can see the beds, you can see the new field rows, you can see the greenhouse, and you can see the Bellevue Public Library, but between that is a track. Well, we would just stand there and make friends. And it was amazing because people were depressed. They were overwhelmed, they were laid off, they couldn't see their family, they didn't know where to go. Well, I'd be hiding out there in the herb garden that you can't see because I do hide well, believe it or not. And I'd be like, hey, buddy. And they would just come in and start volunteering. So part of bringing everyone into your garden during a pandemic is our cardinal rule was, we were like, you know what? We keep politics out of the garden. So we were fortunate doing all of 2020, and now that is one of our cardinal rules. We don't care what you're doing or how you're doing it. We just want you to come in, be a buddy, and work with us. We are a welcoming space. Our common goal is to love and to serve. So again, doesn't matter what t-shirt you're wearing or what's going on in your world, we just want you to come in. The second piece of it that is so important, and it's part of my personal mission, is creating an atmosphere or an ability garden. So if you can look to your right, you can see, the picture of our new beds. Again, these were from a grant from the Predators Foundation. This is part of the construction of our new beds. We created 20 and they are spaced and drained appropriately such that folks with walkers or wheelchairs can navigate. We're also going to be building taller ones with benches. If you also can peep in the back, we have a wonderful patio that was built by Savannah. She was an Eagle Scout. She built the patio that our wheelchair beds and our high raised beds. When I say high raised, these are for folks that may have some trouble bending over, possibly arthritis, or maybe they need to lean. We have an environment just for them. So again, my personal favorites, and I would love to show you all more pictures, but we always want to respect our students' privacy. We do have waivers for the folks that you are seeing, but I just wanted to quickly show you one of my favorite programs. So with Bellevue Middle School and with Hillwood High School, if anybody has a student in Metro Nashville, you will be equally confused by what are known as A days or B days. So the wonderful Fleckenstein, her exceptional education students come to us on A days. And what does that mean? So with exceptional education, a lot of times they have kind of some work training, right? They could go to Goodwill, they can go to restaurants, they can roll silverware. There are all kinds of skills and things that folks can do. However, if you see the picture I think it's more fun for us to all sort gloves. So in the large picture, you can see us all using our skills to know our left and our right, how to put our thummies together and how to fold gloves, because with our beautiful volunteers, we do have to match up and wash the gloves every week. And the top right hand, you can see our students are actually adding more flowers to a Girl Scout project that was done last year to create a pollinator garden. And then on the bottom, we have two of our lovely friends feeding our biggest and best friend at the garden. That is the Divine Miss B. She is our last chicken from our flock. She's approximately 14 years old and she is spoiled rotten. We have volunteers called chicken tenders. Let me repeat this, chicken tenders that come in at sunrise, midday, and at evening time to take care again of the Divine Miss B. She is living her best life. So I think one of the final points that I want to talk about, again, we've talked about the importance of effective program management to build community, appropriate volunteer opportunities, how important education is. It's necessary to always reduce garden waste and recycle as much as possible, provide access. And then the final point is what we plant is what you want and need. So we start our planting and planning in October. So by the time October is in, we should be finished. We should already know what is going in that garden. The budget is already done. The garden managers have already submitted their reports, and we know what's going to be ready in May. Part of this, the most important part, I should say, is not just what Missy wants to plant, but we engage the community and volunteers in the decision making. We actually go and meet yearly now with the community bank and food bank and say, okay, what are your clients needing? If we're working with any place that we're donating food, we always want to make sure that what we are growing is what people want. I mean, seriously, you're like, do I really want 3,000 pounds of bok choy? No, that's not helpful. So again, making sure, especially with our volunteers have a say in what we're planting, because those are the folks, believe you me, that are going to be out there 7 days a week harvesting and helping us deliver it. So in 2020, we were so excited. We donated, I told you about how we had to shut the garden down because of COVID, but we focused on building the field rows. We were able to donate 1,204 tons of produce. And in 2021, we did have an unfortunate issue with the mosaic virus. I believe I touched on that earlier, that's why with community gardens, when people want their own beds, we have to make sure that they understand effective virus and pest control. So we did lose our squash and zucchini to the mosaic virus, but that's okay. We still donated over 1,000 pounds of produce. And in 2022, yay, our goal is going to be 2,000 pounds. So I wanted to thank, of course, everyone for listening to me and hanging out. I want you to stay in touch, please. You can go to our website. We're bellgardentn.org, or you can just search Bell Garden. We are not in Washington State, by the way. That can be confusing. We love our volunteers. You can send an email. It's also all on the website to volunteer@bellgardentn.org. We are on the internets. I have nothing to do with that. That is not my strong suit. But please, please reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're actually doing a walking garden tour. If you really want to see the whole garden and listen to me talk even more, you can tune in tonight on Facebook Live. We are doing a co-presentation with Arts Bellevue. Again, building that community in the area to give a garden tour. So again, like everyone said, if you have any questions for Latha or for me, please type them up in the chat box. And if I can stop sharing, yay.
Wonderful.
I'm going to turn you back over.
Great. Thank you so much, Missy. That was fantastic. Really enjoyed hearing all about the kind of like intimate back end stuff about the garden, how it actually gets run. So we got like some actual, materials and plants that we saw from Latha, which was amazing. And we got to see how they can have all these different even decor uses, but then we got to see how it actually gets run and what it does for the community. So thank you both for such a wonderful kind of primer on community gardens. We have so many community gardens in Nashville. I will be sure in our follow-up email to try to send some more information about other gardens, since some folks in the beginning didn't know if they had one near them, and I'm sure they do. So fantastic. And just before we go over to Jen, I was just thinking, I read something recently that really struck out to me, and when you were speaking, Missy, it reminded me again that there's something really wonderful about a garden, because there's opportunities to make mistakes, and there are opportunities to have things maybe not go the way that you originally intended. Learning from that, kind of getting that flexibility, understanding that some things go wrong and some things go right. And I think that that's something that's particularly beautiful about the community garden, because you're learning in community, and you're getting together with other folks and being vulnerable. And I just think that that's a really beautiful part of the community garden. And you don't have to respond to that, but I just wanted to share that because it seemed resonant. But Jen, I know we have some questions in the chat, and so let's get to those.
Yeah, we do have some questions in the chat. Of course, if you have any other questions as we go along, don't hesitate to throw those in there, and I'll circle back to that. But I'm just going to go in order. So these first couple questions are for you, Latha. The first one comes from Susan. She wanted to know about the Farm in the City website, and then Erin Thompson wanted to know how to volunteer at Farm in the City. And I think in the chat there was a link that was sent out, but wanted to make sure if there was any other information you wanted to provide about the website or resources for Farm in the City and opportunities to volunteer.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes, MDA, since it is an MDHA community garden, they maintain the website. I have a personal Instagram that I use mostly, about 99% just for Farm in the City information. And that Instagram account is at Nashville Grows. So I've been maintaining that for the last, since 2017, just to showcase what is in the garden. In terms of volunteering, usually people DM me directly. There's the individual organizations that are helping maintain the garden. And I listed a few of them: Starbucks, Marathon Works, individual gardeners. They all have their own Facebook sites, and they bring people in. It's really just a community-based effort, and it's a lot of just local people who are all around, who actually see the garden day to day, that kind of take ownership. And that's kind of worked really well for us. We sign up 50 gardeners, about 50 gardeners each year to the beds. And these gardeners are the ones who kind of make the decisions in terms of volunteering and helping keep up the space. And that's been a wonderful thing to see, is just the ownership that everyone has in the garden.
Fabulous. All right. Okay, so, and I did share that Instagram handle in the chat for everyone, so they can grab it there. Hopefully I put that in correctly, but we'll also, again, follow up in our follow-up email with that as well. So everyone has it. Missy, these next couple questions are for you, and then I have some questions for both of you. So first off, you mentioned the milk jugs and cottage cheese containers. There's actually two questions that go along with this, or a few. One, are gallon containers of any help, or do they have to be half containers? And then what else do you need? Is there a list somewhere? How can people know what kind of containers you need?
Yes. So the list. So first of all, please go to our website or follow us on the social media, as I say, because volunteers do a great job of saying, this is exactly what we need and this is how we need it. I will actually show y'all something really cool. I told you not to. I tried to move everything out of the way earlier. So here's something fun. So everybody, for your gallon containers, you can actually do something amazing called winter sewing. So be sure and check out our classes, because Deborah Stillwell teaches our winter sewing class. I won't waste your time now, but keep this for your own, use as well. Bring them to us. But you can actually start almost anything in a milk jug in your own, backyard or front yard if you really want to be neighborly. So yes, so everything is on our website. And how's that?
Yes, and was
a
there,
question.
the other kind of minor question with that was, are full gallon containers okay for
Oh,
what
yeah.
y'all are using, or,
Sorry, I wasn't
okay,
being clear.
just
Yeah,
making
this is
sure,
the,
no, I just
yeah,
want
this
to
is
make
the full
sure,
gallon.
and y'all can use those just as well as the half container.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you do succession planting? This one was another one for you, Missy.
Absolutely. Always. That's how we keep everything going and going and going. And so for those of you who have not practiced that before, you plant and then 2 weeks later you subplant and then you just keep planting. So as long as Mother Nature allows, that you have everything that you need.
And before I get to the questions for both of you, what time is the tour on Facebook tonight?
7 o'clock.
All right, 7 o'clock on Facebook.
Yes.
Okay, so there were a couple questions that they came in at different times, so I think they kind of go to both of you. So whoever wants to popcorn in there and answer, or both of you. So Ed asked if there was a list of locations of community gardens in Nashville, and they were specifically wanting to know about, is there one near Haynes Middle School? So do either of you have recommendations of resources of how to find those local community gardens? Is there a list somewhere?
Their Trap Gardens keeps a list, and they even have a little map that shows where the community gardens are. But the best thing I think is word of mouth and finding out what's locally. It's amazing how many people drive by on Highway 40 and say they had no idea this community garden existed when they do come in. So I think asking around locally, and then what might be really exciting is if you find out that there isn't a community garden close by, think about starting one.
That is a
Absolutely.
perfect segue into another question, because someone did ask what goes into creating a community garden. Could I use my land for a shared gardening space? Any thoughts on how to actually get started?
Missy, did you want to take this one? I do want to just give my opinion on this. I talked about community gardens, but then I also talked about how there's so many other opportunities to just grow food in shared spaces. And one thing that I think is highly underutilized in Nashville is that if you have a friend with land, or if you live in a suburb or a city area where someone actually owns a piece of land, it seems like it would just be a great idea to say, hey, I'm interested in planting. I see that you have some space available. Is that something you'd be interested in doing? And I've done this for lots of friends over the years. It's like if a birthday's coming up, I'll say, hey, I've got some trees. Do you want to have some planted in your yard? So I just actually go there. We make it a day, and it turns out to be a great birthday gift, and we plant trees. And those trees, every time I walk around in the community, I get to see those trees that we planted. So it doesn't have to be something as structured as a community garden, in terms of just getting plants out there and understanding that plants and other animals and all these wonderful things that live in our cities, besides just people, can be neighbors that you can become friends with. And hopefully that's something that you learn as you just start somewhere.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent answer. And I will add to it that the second piece of that, depending on what you're going for, is making sure that you do have your tail end covered. We do have waivers for our volunteers. We do have insurance for our property. You do want to make sure, sometimes people can get a little weird and a little suit happy, but you do want to make sure that you're permitted. You want to make sure that you've got what you need. The second fun part, though, is, so my background was actually in like program writing and evaluation. So what I encourage people to do is reach out to me, or Latha, reach out to either one of us. I certainly know that we have lots of groups. We have homeowners associations, we have schools that come out, and I will meet with them. I will go to their campus and I will look and help them understand what needs to be started. I actually have kind of a DIY little program that I've written to help support other people. So again, just definitely give us a shout and come out and see us at the Bell for sure. The third part is that there's kind of this growing consortium. I was invited to it, of garden managers. That's like the Nashville Food Project. That's all these way out, places. And so I think that that's going to be really, really helpful. It's kind of a baby organization of all of us coming together to see how we can help uh, share seeds, share volunteers, share plans. Aside from that, though, so hopefully we'll have more information for our next webinar. I think definitely sometimes just showing up and talking to one of us, you may get more than you wanted, right?
That's so great. And you actually did remind me too, you mentioned the permitting aspect of it. Absolutely another resource too, for if you specifically have a piece of land that you are wondering if you can do something on a larger scale. If you go to the Metro Codes, I will do my best to find a link so we can share it to you in the follow-up email, but there is a whole very confusing land of zoning and regulations. But community gardens are included in that. So you have to have a property that's zoned to allow for community gardening. So I'll do my best to find that information so we can share it with you as well. Because you're absolutely right. If you're doing something on a larger scale, you want to be permitted that you're doing it correctly. That's a really excellent point. Okay, so we have 2 more questions. So this one, I'm throwing it to both of you. There is a question about how do you keep squirrels out?
Cats.
Say that again.
Cats. Honestly, and I'm not being funny. I wish I was.
Yeah.
So when you want to talk about moles and voles and squirrels, that's every gardener's like nightmare. There's very little that you can do. People say chewing gum in holes, but with squirrels, outside of if you don't have a cat, the most important thing to do that we do with vermin, I'm sorry, squirrels are wonderful. We really have to clean up after ourselves. So that is the best way, is like making sure that our corn, our seeds, our compost, everything is like as clean as possible. Otherwise, you're just going to have to get a cat.
We don't have a dedicated cat like the Bell Garden, but I love that. What we do have is we have urban cats that come in and out of the garden. So I think we're very grateful for that. We do have snakes in the garden, which we're actually happy to have them. I mean, it's hard to believe that you have a snake population in urban centers, but there's everything in our urban areas. And so, yes, our snakes and our intermittent cats is what we rely on.
Swear by them.
That is good to know. For my garden at home, maybe I need to get a cat. And then the last question that we have so far, if you've got any other questions, don't hesitate to throw them in the chat because I will go back and check that. But we did have a question. I think this was directed at you, Missy. If you can use empty plastic pots. So in addition to those other things, you're collecting like cottage cheese containers and so on and so forth. Don't
yes.
use any plastic pots.
Yes, and let me give a shout out to our wonderful friends at the Turnip Green. Has anybody out there ever been to the Turnip Green? I hope so. So we go trooping out there, and after everybody has picked up, or they bought all their stuff from Lowe's or whatever, we go and get all of those and we reuse them and reuse them. We honestly reuse all the plastic pots until they are just destroyed. So yes, we can. No matter what Deborah says, we can. Not that I'm a hoarder. But I will say, again, Turnip Green, for those of you who are starting out gardens, Turnip Green is a wonderful resource in Nashville where you can go and just, it's mind-blowing. I don't even know how to explain it. They have everything. Go look them up. Yay, Turnip Green.
Martha, did you want to add anything? Do y'all have any need for any of those types of materials?
Amazingly, we get by with very little. We just focus on building soil is our biggest creation at the garden. If we do, we have a roll of paper that we use for a lot of our packaging. So if we have volunteers that come in and we want to give out plants, we actually roll up the plants in paper and twine. So there's, when you have very limited options, you get very creative with what you do have. And yeah, a roll of paper is what we rely on a lot.
I love that.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Okay, we've got a few other questions coming in. What is the best method you use for motivating volunteers and keeping them involved? That's both of you.
I think the best volunteers are the ones that live around the area and see this garden as their garden. And pretty much whenever I tell all of our gardeners who are there, when you're there at the garden, the gates are wide open, everyone's welcome. And everyone needs to see this as their garden. It is a city garden, and it's their garden. So the motivation is, how much do you want to see your garden grow and keep it healthy? And I think that's the best motivation, is that sense of ownership and pride.
I agree. And I also, one of the things that's really important to me is educating. So when a volunteer comes to us, I mean, it is really frustrating for a volunteer to be, they don't know what they're doing, they're overwhelmed, they're bored, nobody's helping them. So we meet on Fridays to make sure that we know what we're doing on Saturdays. So when we have our volunteers paired up with a key volunteer, they are educated 1, 2, 3, 4 to know exactly what they're doing. You know, because weeding can be really frightening to people, believe it or not. But we always try to make sure that we have a key volunteer with new volunteers that are there so that they are engaged and that they really feel like they did something. And then again, they get free produce during the appropriate seasonal times. But I would agree 100%. I think a lot of times people, they're like, it's not the Missy show, like it's your garden, I'm just hanging out here. But really bringing that sense of pride and community is imperative.
Absolutely. Okay. Oh, we've got more questions coming in. Do either of you have worm bins?
Oh yes. Permaculture.
I've looked into worm bins so often, and then I realized at the community garden we use a lot of wood chips for the base of our beds, and there's a lot of worms in there, and I'm like, there are worms here. So I kind of just stopped at that. But I do think about that. I love worm castings, and I have friends who have them and donate them. And so, yeah, it's something I've looked into a lot of times, but then I'm like, I go out and I see tons of worms in the wood chips, and I'm like, okay, maybe I'm done.
Yeah, and for us, it's also because we're that hybrid school and community garden. It's imperative, like we're teaching a hydroponics class. We're teaching the vermiculture. So it's a kind of a different slant to it. And let me tell you how excited parents are when kids come home with their very own, you know, beginning worm composting bucket set. So yeah, sign up for that this summer. But yeah, it's because we're attached to the schools that we need to make sure that we have all these things.
That's great. We had a worm bin at an event this weekend, and it was very exciting to see how engaged people got. I mean, of all ages. You show someone a worm bin and they're very excited to meet the worms, to learn about the worms, to understand what's going on. It's a wonderful way to educate about all aspects of gardening, of food waste reduction is what we were talking about, just everything. So definitely a great educational tool. All right, I think okay. Oh, we're getting into some real specific questions here. If I cut my hand, does your insurance cover that, or does it fall to my personal medical or universal coverage policy? That's a great question. So yeah, what's that kind of liability if somebody gets hurt in the garden?
I'm going to have to send you to the folks at Erie Insurance. So yeah, that's a really good question. So let me back up. The first thing that we have to do, though it's not specifically answering that, is we have to make sure that when you're working with us, that you are working in a volunteer opportunity that meets your ability, right? So if you've never used a saw before, you're not going to be out building beds. We always make sure that we have all the appropriate gloves and tools on hand. Remember, this is part of that whole the thing that I was saying, the program management piece. So to be fair, we haven't really had any personal injuries. We've had some bee stings, but that is a really specific question. I think the main thing is covering all of the staff. But yeah, wow, maybe I should have gone to law school. But yeah, I don't think I really have a specific answer for that, except for I can certainly provide a copy of our volunteer waiver if you're interested in volunteering. But I can also tell you that it is our goal to make sure that you have everything that you need and that you are matched with the appropriate opportunity when you come to us. Good question, though.
Latha, do you have anything else to add for that question?
No, we do have our waivers that we have everyone sign. If I actually have just gotten rid of any kind of cutting instruments for our volunteer sessions, just one less thing to worry about. Yeah.
Yeah. But matching the
Wonderful.
volunteer to the opportunity, I think, is imperative.
Absolutely. And so I think that answers Pam's question about the waiver. We'll make sure we'll grab a copy of that and add that into our follow-up email if that's for folks. So y'all can take a look at that as well. Aaron, I did want to mention to you, he asked about how to find the local community garden. We did touch on that earlier. So that was Trap Garden has a list, and we'll send you other information that we can find in our follow-up email. But that, it looks like that is it on our questions in the chat. But these are some really good questions and really great information. Christina, in our last presentation, we talked about trees. We both realized we needed to plant a tree together. Maybe now we also need to take a class together. It's just going to be, we're just adding to our to-do list of things every time we have another presentation. So this is great.
Love it.
All right. Okay.
Wonderful. Well, I think we're ready to wrap up. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Missy. Thank you, Latha. This was informative. It was funny. It was interesting. It was perfect. I want to kind of end on a note of, I think it was Latha who said this, that, if you want to see your community grow and you want to see your community be healthy, community gardens are a great place to start, and really cultivating that feeling of everyone's kind of working together for our Nashville community. So get on out there, get your hands dirty, get excited for the spring, and get excited for our next episode, which will be May 11th, and it will be with the Tennessee Conservationist Editor-in-Chief, Heather Lose, and we'll be talking about how do you communicate about your passion for sustainability to get other folks excited to do their own work, maybe start a community garden with that conversation. We are very excited for that. We thank you all so much. Look out for the follow-up email with all this information and the video, and as well as all the other videos that we've ever posted on YouTube. And I think that's it. So thank you all so much, and enjoy a little bit of sun right now, and hopefully no bad storms later.
All right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, y'all.